Tonight's program is the 1920s building boom in downtown Ames. Oh, there, see, I hit the wrong button. All right. The presentation will focus on several questions. What was the architectural transformation in downtown Ames? What were some of the businesses of the time? Who were the influencers? But before we talk about the 1920s, we need some background information. Wood was the material of choice for early Ames buildings. However, wood was, of course, a fire hazard. By 1890, the city of Ames had passed an ordinance stating that all new buildings downtown must be constructed of brick. Brick was readily available, came in many colors, and limited in design only by the mason's skills. The city's first water tower was just north of the corner of Main and Kellogg that you see here, and of course was made of wood. Prior to this, the only water tower available was owned by the railroad and was located on the south side of the track. So if you can imagine a fire, trying to fight a fire, pretty difficult. The wood buildings were gradually replaced with brick buildings. These were generally buildings in the Victorian style of architecture. Major characteristics, as you see here, elaborate cornices, decorative caps on windows, ornamental framing, and a very exuberant variety of shapes and materials. This shows the north side of Main Street in 1907. You can see some of the details of the Victorian style of architecture. The elaborate cornices up here and way over here. This is a little dark, but you'll see more of them in a minute. What a bustling place the corner of Main and Kellogg was, with the intermingling of men, women, children, horses, cars, and of course the streetcar. Downtown Ames was the commercial heart of Ames. Today, our commerce is scattered into numerous locations of the city. But again, you can see some of those elaborate cornices here. This is the Tilden block. We'll talk about that a little bit later. This is the south side of Main Street in 1907 in the Victorian style of architecture. What's now, let me help you get oriented here. What's now the Cynthia Duff Plaza is where the Bog shoe store is. So that's this right here. So this building is completely gone now. That's the walk through. And then I want you to look over here. See all these arches up here? We're going to see those again in a minute. So very elaborate treatment here. Arches up here. Lots of curves. This area here is getting into the area where Whiskey River is today, right? So this is 212 Main today, London Underground. It's a rare remnant of Victorian architecture that remains in downtown Ames. And these arches, whoops, wrong button. These arches up here are the ones I just pointed out in the previous slide, okay? Much of the architectural information in tonight's presentation is based on this work. Will Page's 1992 Survey of Downtown, commissioned by the City of Ames to identify historic architecture in the city. Downtown Ames was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2018. That nomination material is also based on this 1992 survey work. I was just nagging at Kathy saying, where is this book? We'll have to work on that. By the turn of the century, architectural style was changing. A new style, the commercial style of architecture, was becoming popular. Whereas Victorian architecture was exuberant and filled with ornament, this new style of architecture was simpler, more rectilinear, and restrained. Major characteristics of this style are structural brick walls, clean rectilinear shapes, and richly textured surfaces. These elements are evidenced by parapet panels, brick patterning, polychrome, string courses, enframed windows, and paired windows. You've seen all those downtown, right? You look doubtful. Where do you find this stuff? You have to look up at the second or the third story of the building. The first floor of the buildings often have a large glass area used for display and marketing purposes to draw people into the store. Here you see the upper level of 327 Main, which is near the Tom Evans Plaza, and 215 Main, which is between Douglas and Kellogg on the north side of the street. Let's look first at parapet panels and brick patterning. The parapet is the area between the upper story windows and the top edge of the building, okay? So there are lots of them downtown. The brick detailing that you see here in the parapet panel has a strong contrast in color in the checkerboard design. There are numerous pattern styles seen in the parapet area of the Main Street buildings. This is a good time for me to show you this. There are some of these brochures over on the table. This was done a few years back based on the plaques on historic buildings. So if there's a map in here, there's a little bit of architectural information in here. But if you want to take a walk downtown sometime and look at architecture, this is a pretty good guide for you that is available over here, or we also have them at the museum. Two other elements are string courses and paired windows. Paired windows are windows in groups of twos, as you see here. A string course is a horizontal band running the entire width of a building. Here you see two string courses, one above and one below the paired windows. The material used in this string course is cast concrete. Next is polychrome or multicolor. Bricks come in many colors. These colors of brick are used as a design element in the commercial style of architecture. More polychrome. In the bright sunlight, some of the bricks on this building actually have a purple appearance. This building has really a wide variety of polychrome. Who knows where this is? Anybody? Some additions put onto the building? This is the frame shop. Okay, you know where that is on Main Street? Okay, look up at the top of that building sometime to see lots and lots of colored brick. Enframed windows is the framing of windows in a contrasting color or contrasting material. This is a strong design element on a building with many windows, as you can see here. And we're going to go back to a lot of these buildings as we're talking more, so I'm not worried too much about identifying them right now. Three major new buildings set the stage with a new style of architecture in downtown Ames. The Sheldon Munn Hotel at the corner of Main and Kellogg, the Municipal Building or the new City Hall at the corner of Kellogg and 5th Street, and the Masonic Hall at the corner of Douglas and 5th Street. These were all built in 1915 and 1916. During the years just before entering World War I, there was widespread expansion and construction in the business district, including lots of infrastructure improvements. Sheldon Munn Hotel is seen here in this photo of 1918. This building was the result of investment by Parley Sheldon, H.L. Munn, and A.H. Munn. H.L. Munn died in 1920, so A.H. Munn, the Munns are real tongue twisters. A.H. Munn is often better remembered for his investment in the hotel. This hotel was designed by the architectural firm of Proudfoot and Bird, at the time the most prestigious firm in the state of Iowa. The monumental scale of the building and its function as a community center shifted the business center from Main and Douglas over to Main and Kellogg. This hotel was known as the best hotel between Chicago and Denver. And it was the social center for Ames, the college, and the region. A.H. Munn, or Fred as he was known, was the second generation of the Munn family who came to Ames in 1891 to operate a lumberyard. And that lumberyard operated for many, many years at the east corner of Main and Duff. Alfred Herschel, known as Fred, is on the left in this three-generation photo. Fred, Grace, his wife Grace is on the right. Okay, Fred's on the left, Grace is on the right. Fred was known as a far-seeing businessman, and he aided many, many contractors and charities. He served on the Ames City Council for 10 years, and he was an original member of the Mary Greeley Hospital Board of Trustees. Grace was devoted to the Campfire Organization, PEO, and other civic organizations. Mayor Parley Sheldon was a prominent investor in the hotel. He was known as the perennial mayor, having served as mayor for 18 years over a 32-year period. So he kept going away and coming back and not going away, just getting not elected and then getting reelected. He sought solutions to local issues such as city ownership of the light plant, the 1918 issue of relocating the light plant, and of course, the 1916 secession efforts of the Fourth Ward. He was a key player in the 1891 development of the Ames and College Railroad, or the Dinky as many of us call it. Later, he worked to locate the Highway Commission in Ames, that is now the DOT. So a lot of influence in shaping our city earlier. This is the Municipal Building, or the new City Hall, in a 1921 photo. With all of Parley Sheldon's civic environment, you can be sure that he had a hand in this new City Hall built in 1915. In fact, it was his leadership that finally resulted in a new City Hall after many years of discussion. His last term as mayor ended in 1916, so he was laying a lot of groundwork for this building, which was built in 1915 and 16. This was designed by architectural firm Levy, Norse, and Rasmussen, a premier architectural firm at the time. The north side housed the fire department, complete with a feed room for horses. We don't usually think about that when we think about City Hall. The third building, the Masonic Hall, was also built in 1916 and is shown in this photo of 1919. Today, we know this building as the Octagon Center for the Arts. It was designed by the same architectural firm as the new City Hall, Levy, Norse, and Rasmussen. The building features multicolored brickwork with geometric shapes and cast concrete trim, concrete pilasters at the entryway with Prairie School detailing over the main entry. This building contains the most extensive collection of Luxfer glass in the transom area remaining in downtown Ames, including a glass pattern designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. So what is Luxfer glass? Why does your picture not look like mine? The Luxfer glass is cut out of your picture. That's a terrible thing. It should be way over here on the left. All right, we'll come back to Luxfer glass. We won't see it on this building, but we will talk about Luxfer glass again. So we're missing part of the picture here for some reason. Fronted by Wallace Greeley, this building provided the Ames Masons with a new meeting hall on the 3rd floor, space for the Tilden Manufacturing Company on the 2nd, and retail stores on the 1st floor. So who was Wallace Greeley? He was mayor of Ames from 1889 to 1890. Whew. He served on the Ames School Board, and he served 3 terms in the Iowa legislature. So a lot of political activity there for him. With his wife, Mary, donated the original site for the Ames Public Library and donated land and money to build the Mary Greeley Memorial Hospital. Mary was very involved in the social and cultural life of Ames. She served on the library board from its founding until her death in 1914. This is Wallace Greeley's bank at Main and Douglas Avenue. Note the arch that was very common in Victorian architecture. Although the brick was covered with stucco as part of a 1916-1917 facelift, the arch remains there today. Wallace Greeley and Parley Sheldon that we just talked about were banking and political competitors for many years. However, they put these differences aside when it came to the welfare of the community. But here's a story about their competition with each other. In March of 1915, the Ames Women's Club was undertaking their very first project, raising money for a drinking fountain on Main Street. The location discussed was at Main and Douglas, at one of the north corners, in front of either Sheldon's Bank on the east side of the intersection or Greeley's Bank on the west side of the intersection. The cost of the drinking fountain was $50. Hard to believe, isn't it? The husband of one of the women, Mr. Linebaugh, volunteered to talk with the bankers to see about a contribution. He first went to Mr. Greeley and suggested that they each contribute $25. Greeley, of course, asked where the fountain would be located. Linebaugh said, "There's talk of putting it in front of the Story County Bank," which was Parley Sheldon's bank. So Greeley quickly wrote a check for $50 and said, "Just leave Sheldon out of this. Put it over here." And so Parley Sheldon was not consulted, and Greeley got the fountain in front of his bank where it remained for many years. In addition to these 3 new buildings, 1916 and 1917 saw widespread alterations to the facades of existing buildings on Main Street. This began near Main and Douglas in the area that is currently Whiskey River. We saw that earlier in the Victorian architecture. Other locations quickly followed suit. Newspapers of the time commented on the result. Quote, "The many improvements which have been made on the fronts of Ames business houses during the past few weeks are very noticeable, and they greatly add to the looks of the good old town." That's from the Ames Weekly Tribune, May 18, 1916. What you see here on the screen shows the Tilden block before and after the facelift. So on the left side of the screen is the Tilden block before, and you can see lots of Victorian architecture characteristics there. There are some filters applied to these photographs to help you focus. So the part that you see clearly in the photo on the left and the part you see clearly in the photo on the right are the same building before and after the facelift. Because so many owners of existing buildings embrace this new style of architecture, combined with the new construction, the image of the Ames Main Street district was transformed into one characterized by simpler, utilitarian, no-nonsense style of architecture. This new design for a commercial building continued into the 1960s. Will Page, in his 1992 study, uses the term facelifts on Main. So if you hear that sometime, it's referring to the architecture change. Here's another example of the change. This is the building at the northeast corner of Main and Kellogg. Note that in the photo on the left shows one large building, in addition to all those Victorian details way up there in the cornice. Built by partners Judge John Stevens and Professor Joseph Budd, the upstairs once housed the Opera House with auditorium-style seating for up to 600 people. However, the partnership was dissolved, and in 1903, the space was divided into two buildings, and that's the way we tend to think of that building today, as two separate buildings. Although stucco now covers the brick, the original window arches, raised cornice, and the roofline turrets are still visible in the photo there on the right. Because the transformation of the building facades was so universal in Ames, the downtown has a unified feeling of design. This makes the district distinct because the dominant architectural image is 20th century rather than Victorian. It is unusual in Iowa for a downtown to consist primarily of these unified designs. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, we have ugly architecture, we don't have any Victorian stuff. So we just need to learn about what we have. Okay, now we're up to the 1920s. That took a while, but it's important background information. This photo of a 1919 parade shows the lack of development west of Kellogg and the Sheldon Munn on Main Street. Development was slow to happen in this 300 block of Main, partially due to a slough that ran through the area. A few years after it was drained, new brick buildings developed. So all that empty space there. Here you see a 1920 Sanborn fire insurance map. These were commissioned by cities to show the location of built structures, building materials, gas tanks, and other fire safety details. This one shows the north side of the 300 block of Main Street with the Sheldon Munn at one corner. Over here, oops, wrong button again. Over here, Sheldon Munn, okay? All these empty lots. So you get down to the other corner. We're down at Clark Avenue now, where there was a garage. Not Clark, Burnett, sorry, Burnett. The 1920s building boom brought infill to the 300 block of Main on both the north and the south sides of the street. This 1938 photo shows the infill of the 300 block. The location of the Sheldon Munn and other businesses in this block changed the center of the business district from Main and Douglas to the corner of Main and Kellogg. One of the new buildings was the Lynch Ash Building, which opened in 1922. It's really hard to find early photographs of this early development in this block. So this photo you're seeing is probably from the 1960s for the building that was built in 1922. However, the appearance of the building is only slightly changed from the original. So the center section there without the filter is the Lynch Ash Building. This ad ran in the Ames Daily Tribune and Evening Times on September 6, 1922, announcing the opening of the building. Funded by C.J. Lynch and Charles Ash, the building was first occupied by the Lynch and Ash Real Estate Company, Ames Building and Loan Association, a doctor and a dentist. The nonprofit loan company financed more than 100 homes between 1921 and 1923. The Ames Daily Tribune and Evening Times of June 27th, 1923 remarked, quote, almost as phenomenal as the growth of Jack and the Beanstalk is the recent growth of the Ames Building and Loan Association. Charles Ash was secretary treasurer of the company and C.J. Lynch was a board member. Fred Munn, who was mentioned earlier as an investor in the Sheldon Munn Hotel, also served on the board. But I want to call your attention to two other parts of this ad. On the right here, look who provided the wiring. the Nelson Electric Company. That company is still in operation today, run by the fourth and fifth generations of the original founder, Ben Nelson. Ben organized the company in 1908. Really remarkable to have a company running that long, owned and operated by the same family. Secondly, at the, oh, sorry, wrong button again. At the bottom here, the plumbing and heating was done by the W.G. Madison Company. Who was W.G. Madison? Walter G. Madison was the third Black person to graduate from Iowa State, receiving an engineering degree in 1914. He established a plumbing and heating business here in Ames. He is credited also with constructing some of the city's sewer system during a big paving project in 1916 and 1917, and also with writing parts of the first Iowa Plumbing Code. He later became a professor of engineering at Howard University in Washington, D.C. In 1922, Madison and a guest were involved in a discrimination incident. On February 1st of 1922, Madison ordered a meal at the New London restaurant. That location is about where the Spice restaurant is now on West Main Street there. He ordered his meal. The waitress refused to serve him because of his race. This is 1922. Madison filed a suit for $5,000 in damages. Iowa statutes stated that any hotel, cafe, eating house, refreshment place, or other place that serves the public must furnish food or other service for a person regardless of his color or race. So it was pretty bold of the waitress to say, I'm not going to serve you. The case was settled out of court in January of 1923, almost a year after the incident, with the restaurant paying $100 to Madison. This was viewed as a victory in the field of civil rights at the time. All right, let's go back to the building here. This is a more recent picture of the upper story of 317 Main, which is the Lynch Ash Building. You can see paired windows, a cast concrete string course above and below the windows, and a brickwork plaque in the area of the parapet. Some alterations have occurred in this area just above the first story windows. If you visit this location today, you will find scaffolding and work in progress. The front is being tuck pointed, and the transom area that has been covered for many years will have glass returned to the area. The Lux for Glass, I promised you we'd come back to Lux for Glass. Oh, where's my pointer? There it is. Lux for Glass here. Okay. The Lux for Glass seen in the photo on the right will be restored. Many storefronts had this type of glass, which are small squares of leaded glass. They're usually about 4 inches square in the transom area on the first story. Most of it has disappeared from downtown Ames. The most extensive example remaining is located at the Octagon Center for the Arts and its neighbor on Douglas Avenue between Main and 5th Street. This is another building constructed in the 1920s at 319, 321 Main. Robert Wilcox of Denison owned the building and moved his family to Ames, opening a dry cleaning business in the west half of the building. If you look closely, I don't think we can see it. Sorry. There is a sign that says Royal Cleaners right here. Okay, it's very blurry when I look at the screen. I don't know if it is when you look at it. Royal Cleaners sign in the picture on the left. The Wilcox family lived above the business. The Walsh hat shop opened in the east half of the building. Royal Cleaners was operated by the Wilcox family who used the building until 1965. So very long-standing royal cleaners in that building. Some of you, however, may think of this building as the home of Swank's Jewelry, which operated there from 1964 until 2018. In 1968, the partition wall between the two storefronts was removed and Swank's expanded into the entire building. Architect Edgar L. Barber designed the building, which includes the tiled roof with brackets in the parapet area. Concrete string courses are seen above the windows and also at the second floor windowsill level. Okay, so if we look at this photo on the right, string courses, okay? Remember that horizontal band going all the way across the building. Here's the tiled roof up here with some brackets. That is original. It's shown on the original blueprints. The bricks are in shades of yellow brown and orange brown. Alterations have occurred above the first story windows and to the first story windows that you see here, although the central entrance design remains. Across the street on the south side, new buildings were also appearing. Here you see the Hamilton Building at 304 Main, which was constructed in 1925. Initial tenants were Carr Hardware and the McClellan department store. It's kind of off-centered on the screen. So you can see Carr Hardware here in this picture, which is probably from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, just going by the cars. I'm not really a car person. And then today, you can see the building over here. Some alterations have occurred on the first story of this building as recently as 2006. So this is the building where the Chamber of Commerce is located, and then Brown Shoe Store also. The Sheldon Munn addition was constructed in 1926, which is seen to the left in this photo. Right here. Okay. That's a 1926 addition. It was designed by the Proudfoot and Bird firm, architects of the original 1916 building. Built by Ben Cole, well-known building contractor, it opened to the public in February of 1927. The Sheldon Munn Hotel is the most complex historic commercial building in Ames in terms of size, form, and mass, and also because it was designed by architects Proudfoot and Bird. The addition physically demonstrates the economic boom of the 1920s in Ames, and specifically in the 300 block of Main Street. John Shipp, seen in the center of the left photo, started work at the Sheldon Munn Hotel in 1916 as a waiter, and later took over as the hotel's engineer and maintenance man. Over the years, he came to know every inch of the building's facilities and how to keep everything running and working well. The photo on the right shows Shipp in his workshop in 1953. He worked at the Sheldon Munn for 48 years. John's wife, Nellie, is the daughter of Archie and Nancy Martin. John Shipp and Archie Martin lobbied ISU President Pearson to allow Black students to live in campus housing. John and Nellie housed Black female ISU students in their home when access to the campus housing was unavailable. I think most of you have probably heard of the Martins housing the men, but a lot of people are not aware that John and Nellie Shipp were housing the women. Prohibition was also happening in the 20s, 1919 to 1933. There are rumors of an illegal speakeasy in the basement of the Sheldon Munn Hotel with a tunnel under the street for discreet comings and goings. Thus far, we have not been able to document that. So anyone listening who has any information pertaining to this, we want to hear from you. This is a very recent photo of the Sheldon Munn. The new Main Street pavers were being installed when this photo was taken about a week ago. When I was down there this afternoon, they were still digging around with those pavers. But someday it'll be finished. Following many years of neglect, the building today is in good condition due to the stabilization work by architect John Lott, and more recently, restoration and rehabilitation by OEI Incorporated, the current owner. Look way up to the top sometime when you're downtown. Even the flagpole on the top of the building has been restored. It's a long way up there. Down the block from the Sheldon Munn at 323, 325 is the 1928 Montgomery Ward building. At this time, you can see in the photo, Montgomery Ward occupied 2 adjacent buildings. This one here on the right is known historically as the Montgomery Ward building. That was a department store selling everything from clothing to farm equipment. Notice the corner building here. Does that look unfamiliar? It's 2 stories in this photo, but today it's only a 1-story building, and that is where Everett's Flowers is located. So sometime the upper story was taken down. And that is a whole nother research question for somebody to find out who and when and why. Financed by Ames car dealer Mac Deutsch and built by Ben Cole again, the 2nd story has rich Art Deco elements with geometric designs in cast concrete, brick, and red glazed tile. This building follows the national trend in Art Deco architecture. The vertical parapets accent the unusual 3-bay facade while framing the intricate brickwork on the parapets. Few changes have occurred to this parapet area. Some changes have occurred on the 1st story. So you know this building today when you're downtown as, oh wow, now it went out of my brain. Who's got the name?
American Country.
American Country, thank you, thank you. All right, I've been going in chronological order with these buildings in case you wonder why I'm jumping all over in terms of geography until now. In the summer of 2021, the Ames History Museum completed the purchase of this building, the Ames Pantorium, located at 410 Douglas. In the 1920s, new construction was also occurring on the side streets just off of Main Street. This building is one example, constructed in 1925 and 26 and opening in April of 1926. The building was built for Ed Cooker to bring all of his cleaning operations under one roof, providing, quote, modern facilities equal to those anywhere in Iowa, said the Ames Daily Tribune and Ames Evening Times of April 14th in 1926. Pantorium is a common name from the 19th century for cleaners and tailors. The Pantorium operated in this building until 2010, long time. This 1954 photo shows the iconic Pantorium sign, which was installed in 1937. A newspaper story about the installation lists it as weighing 300 pounds. So you wouldn't want that falling. Also note a change in the 2nd story windows. So let me go back. 5 windows up there, right? Now suddenly there are 6 windows. So the windows right in the area of the sign were changed. This building was designed by the local architectural firm of Kimball, Parley, and Cowgill. The firm designed a number of buildings in Ames. A.H. Kimball was the founding head of what is now the architecture department at Iowa State University. He served as department head until his death in 1946. R.M. Parley and C.H. Cowgill were also on the Iowa State College faculty for several years. The architecture of the Pantorium reflects the forward-looking design of commercial buildings developing at this time. The creamy colored storefront features glazed brick, which is very rare in downtown Ames. It has contrasting glazed brick framing the facade and the 3 panels between the first floor storefront and the second floor windows. Near the top is a terracotta cornice with dental work. The Pantorium maintains a high degree of architectural integrity and is a contributing structure in the Ames Main Street Historic District. So what will the Ames History Museum do with this building? The Pantorium is a key component of our 3-part expansion plan. This is an artist rendering of the Douglas Avenue side of the project. Very few changes will be seen on the exterior of the building. The main entrance to the museum will be moved over to the Pantorium building. As visitors enter, they will see the restored historic terrazzo floor and the tin ceiling. The sign and the second-story windows will be restored to their original appearance. This floor plan shows the components of the expansion plan. The Pantorium is across the bottom here. Will include a welcoming lobby, a research and reading room, and exhibit fabrication space. New galleries, the second component, are here. So this will be all new construction. This will be built to the east of our current museum building. The galleries will be connected to the Pantorium and the existing building by an exhibition corridor here. Okay. The third component is renovation of our existing building to better suit museum operations, including space to house the artifact collection. Okay. Strategically placed elevator, new elevator here will take visitors to the second floor of the Pantorium and the existing building. The second floor of the Pantorium will include an event space and gathering hall, which is here, specifically designed with bathrooms, kitchenette, and storage. We're excited to return the second floor space to its original usage, public space. When the building opened, the second floor was used by the American Legion. From 1932 to 1939, the Bungalow Tea Room operated here. Ames' social elite of the time attended luncheons, birthday parties, baby, and bridal showers at the Bungalow Tea Room. With the museum expansion, it will provide space for museum events and be available for public rental. This rendering shows the interior of the lobby area and the permanent exhibit. We've been working with a professional exhibit company to plan the permanent exhibit gallery. The exhibit will feature a scale model of the Dinky engine here. You'll be able to walk on it and hang out the windows for a photo opportunity. An Ames timeline, and also explore themes such as businesses, transportation, people from all backgrounds who shaped Ames. The exhibits will provide an interactive environment for all ages to learn about the history of the community. The changing exhibit gallery will house shorter-term exhibits, exploring special anniversaries and events, undertold stories, and the impact of national events on local history. This shows you the square footage comparison. The new exhibit space will be about 5 times larger than what we currently have. There will be an exhibit fabrication shop, which we do not have now, a gathering space, and a dedicated reading and research room. And then there is considerable increase of on-site collection storage. This is a big project for our organization with a budget of $4.25 million. Currently, we have raised about $2.3 million in pledges and contributions ranging from $100 to $250,000. So that tells you about what we will do with the Pantorium. This is just a brief summary of the many references used to prepare the presentation tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I know I didn't answer all your questions. Yep.
Jewelry store that originally actually held 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very narrow little businesses.
Let's see if we can go back to that real quickly here. And that was really a pretty common theme for businesses on Main Street, to have 2 different sections. We're going to get there. There, whoops, that's what I wanted. Yeah, so if you look at over here on the right, you see the center here, and then you come in the center, and then there's space on each side, one here and one here. And then there was a partition wall down the middle inside. So they were long, narrow spaces. Yeah. But that was pretty common. If we look at the Lynch Ash Building, same thing. You see the center entrance. It's a little bit wider building though, but the same layout, center entrance, and then space on the right and a space on the left. So there were 2 different businesses, one on each side of the center door, and then more businesses upstairs in this particular case. Yeah.
Let us give you a mic before you ask.
Oh, sorry.
Just for folks.
Yeah, so the folks at home can hear you.
We've been on the downtown tour a couple of times. And I guess the one thing that surprised me was that the hotel served for quite a while as the major gathering place for the university. And that for dances, for graduation, for any large gathering, was all done at the hotel before larger places were built on campus, right?
Absolutely. The Sheldon Munn had a ballroom on the 3rd floor. And yeah, lots of things were happening there. So you might come. Farwell Brown in one of his books talks about going to Sunday dinner at the Sheldon Munn. So that's an interesting story to read if you haven't looked at that. It was a place to go with white tablecloths and cloth napkins and all that for special events. But they also did have the ballroom on the 3rd floor. And yeah, lots and lots of events were happening there.
We have a question.
Do you know why that first store that you showed us was called the New York store?
I have no idea. Does anybody know? Anybody have an answer? Probably somebody who came from New York, perhaps. I don't know.
We have a question from online. Do most Main Street buildings have basements?
Yes, most of them do. Some of them, I think, are places you probably don't want to go, but Some of them are very nice. You know, the chamber has recently renovated their whole interior of their building, and they have meeting rooms downstairs. It's very nice. Yeah. We've used the
was a
microphone.
business.
Sorry.
Collegiate Pacific was a business that was in the Octagon Arts Center years ago. Do you remember what years those were? Was the Addams family?
It was the Addams family, yeah. They were making
Blankets,
ponchos for the
sweatshirts.
war.
They made, yes.
Yeah, and they actually operated there for quite a long time. I'm struggling to remember the dates exactly.
They were there in the late 50s, I know that.
Right. In fact, they were still there. No, they were somewhere else. They were still operating, but in a different location in the 1970s even.
I remember a office of McFarland Clinic being downtown and having some of those special windows
Mm-hmm.
in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was on the north side,
That's on Fifth Street.
Fifth Street. Okay.
That building is still there today, owned by Craig and Beth Mars. And it's between Kellogg and Burnett on Fifth Street. Okay, so it's right next to what we think of as the Ames Tribune Building, which really isn't the Tribune Building used by the Tribune anymore. Okay, so it's just to the east of that. And they have their business there, and they've done a very extensive renovation of that building. So McFarland Clinic actually started in that location as a very small building, and then eventually it expanded, and then eventually they added a second floor to it. So that is where McFarland Clinic started. And now it's further up the road.
We have another question from online. Can you tell us a bit about the current residents in the upper floors of downtown buildings? What goes on in those places today?
Well, they didn't invite me in for the party.
Is it mostly businesses or residents?
So I think there's a big combination of some of that space used by residents and some rental apartments. And some of that, frankly, is mostly empty, used for storage, and really could provide some really nice housing if it was renovated. But I know there are certain ones that need a lot of updating to meet current building codes. But of course, the Sheldon Munn now does not have a third floor ballroom anymore. And its upper levels are residential. So there's lots of residency in the Sheldon Munn right now.
Is there much information about the buildings on the south side of Main Street? I noticed many that you focused on were on the north side, like the Quilting Connection and where Duckworth Wearing is and so forth, all the way down to what used to be Penny's a long time ago. Less interesting architecture.
No. On this map here, there are 5 on the south side. So you can see the plaques on those buildings, about 5 of them. This Plaques on Historic Buildings project was a collaboration between the City of Ames, the Historic Preservation Commission, and the Public Library, the Historical Society, we were called then, and the Main Street Cultural District. And I was one of the people who worked on this, and frankly, we would like to have twice as many plaques on historic buildings as we have down there. Some owners were not interested. It's a difficult thing when the owner of the business is not the owner of the building. So we ran into that sometimes, but we really did try with this project to balance that out, although the north side of Main Street has always been more dominant. And of course, there are larger lots on the north side of Main Street. So that was somewhat inhibiting for certain businesses to locate on the south side of Main Street because the lots are smaller because of the railroad tracks that are there. Any more questions? Oh, Madeline has one.
Yes, online. Were any Main Street buildings lost to the fire in the late 1800s through the 1930s?
Oh, absolutely. That's why the new ordinance came in. In fact, the building that you see today, that's the American Legion building, the tall 3-story one there. That site was the site of fires twice. And so, you know, that really wiped out that early massive building we saw in some of these photos. The last fire they had there. So by then it was time to move into this new style of architecture when they rebuilt, for sure. Yeah, other buildings, yeah, certainly quite a number of wood buildings. The Opera House, earlier Opera House located on 5th Street, had a massive fire. So there were quite a few buildings and businesses lost because of fire. Jan, I feel like I only answered half your question, but I can't remember what the other half was. Okay.
I see in here Gilder Designs Guild is
Mm-hmm.
and Duckworth wearing.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Gilder Design is a fascinating building. That building has always been a jewelry store, which I think is totally amazing. If you go in there sometime, if you ask them, they might show you the safe, which is really interesting, the historic safe that they have in there. Where Duckworth Waring is, was another building built by Professor Joseph Budd that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so thank you, Jan, for pointing out unbalance here on the north versus the south side of the street. And I'll tell you, I had a hard time making this as short as it was because there are too many buildings and too many interesting pieces of architecture down there. And so some of them just didn't make the cut, frankly. All
I
right,
think
thank
we've
you
answered
very
all the
much.
questions.
So one more?
Was it Joseph Budd, you said?
Yes,
Was that the Budds who had the Bud House that's now part of YSS?
yeah,
Would that be that same family?
right. Look at this lady making all the connections here. Yeah, Professor Joseph Budd was a professor in horticulture at Iowa State. Their house is the house that remains at the corner of 8th and Kellogg, now used as one of the YSS properties. And some of you may know the story about George Washington Carver and the Budd family. And he is reported to have stayed sometimes in the Budd house. But the daughter of Professor Budd, Etta, was responsible for bringing George Washington Carver to Ames. He was studying art at Simpson College where she taught. And she was very practical. And she said to him, you need a skill and a way to earn money. And so you should go to Iowa State and study horticulture with my father. And so he did. Another really interesting building on the south side is where the men's clothing store is. Well, men's and women's now, Mormons clothing. If you're down there sometime, take a look at the plaque on that building where it talks about James Herman Banning, who lived upstairs when he was a student here in Ames at Iowa State, and he was African-American. He wanted to learn to fly, wanted to be a pilot. No one would teach him. So he finally found somebody in Des Moines to teach him while he was in school here at Iowa State. But he was the first commercial licensed African-American pilot and the first one to do a transcontinental flight across the United States. So that's another story that got cut out.
So what I'm hearing is ask Sharon if you have more questions. All right, I think you've answered all the ones for the folks here. So thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing your knowledge. And